The NFL stands for not for long.
Set, Sharga and Armstead. Roll out, Walker still running out. Looks to the left, wide open, Thompson touchdown. Colin Thompson with the touchdown. There was nobody within 20 yards of
What a catch off the bobble. Colin Thompson scoops it up.
Lofting corner, the end zone. It is caught for the touchdown. The first NFL touch for Colin Thompson is a score.
What's up, everybody? Welcome back to another edition of the Colin Thompson Show. I hope everyone had a great weekend. It is my personal favorite time of the year when it comes to the sports calendar. Yes, I know. September's the best time of the year. Football season. It's still nice out. The fall's awesome in the Mid-Atlantic and the Northeast, really across the country to some extent. I get it. Football season, yes, is the best time of the year. But for the last 18 years of my life, more than that, 20 years of my life, football has been the main thing, and I haven't been able to enjoy the fall because I'm either playing or working or being a student athlete or all the above. So maybe when I'm older, I'll enjoy the fall a little bit. Maybe when I'm out of football, who knows when that will be, either a player or coach or something involved with it, media, I'll be able to enjoy it. But to me, this is my favorite time of year on the sports calendar. Obviously, baseball season is here. I'm a baseball fan. I'm a Phillies fan. But I really don't catch fire with that until the playoffs anyways, unless it's a holiday or it's on in the background. For me, NHL playoffs are the greatest playoffs by far. The jump between the regular season and the postseason is almost concerning. How much it changes. The physicality, like it goes back 30 years of play. Speaking of 30 years of play, I just turned 30, and for me to lift and run and do the things I do, I need Boron Arnicare, all their pain-relieving homeopathic products that are just unbelievable, like literally life-changing. And the company changed my life. We touched base, and now we work together. Like literally the hand creams, the allergy stuff, the pain relief, Boron Arnicare, check them out. They've been around century plus. This is not just like a run-of-the-mill random company, but they have the good stuff in there. That's pain relief. This isn't just all the pain relievers I took early in my football career to help me get through games or get through being sore the next day. I wish I had Arnicare to help me with that. So check them out, guys. Boron USA, Arnicare, a fantastic sponsor of the Colin Thompson Show and Not For Long Media. So the best time of year for me is NHL playoffs. NHL playoffs are here, and it is off to a booming start. I'm going to give my predictions, but before I do, I'm going to tell you about the show today. We have a great show. Kenny Albert, who wrote this book right behind me, A Microphone for All Seasons. Kenny signed it and sent it to me, and I can't wait to read it this summer. We talk about his book for Microphone for All Seasons. His father, Marv, legendary broadcaster, New York Knicks, old NBA, but Kenny now calls every game and has done tons of work across all sports. The guy's an absolute legend in the game already. Football, basketball, baseball, I mean, you name it, hockey's everything. But he's also one of the nicest people in the pro sports world. I could text him in the middle of a game, great job on the call. He gets right back to you. He's hanging out with Keith Jones last year. Hey, I'm hanging out with your buddy Jonesy. He loves that you're a Flyers fan. Hope you're doing well. Like, who does that? Like, this guy doesn't have to text me. We've connected a few different ways over the years, and he's helped me with connections in Sirius satellite radio. Like the best person, if not one of the best in the sports world you can meet, Kenny Albert. First class. And I'm sure he learned that from his father and a lot of the great people around him. He's a great man, great father, and just really love to have him on. So Kenny comes on. Jason Martinez comes on, longtime Philly sports media member. He has a podcast with us, Geez. He also is the host, producer of the Flyers Daily podcast, which literally is a Flyer show every day. We talk about that. We talk about coaching and mentorship on there a little bit. You're going to hear some stories from me about Matt Rule, some things I haven't really talked about before. So that's really fun. Jason was great. All of them are going to give their hockey predictions here for the playoffs. And then Tim Peel joins the show. Tim is a longtime NHL referee who got pretty much pushed out of the NHL. Check out his story. It's pretty crazy. Seemed a little unfair to me. But I digressed. Tim joined us, and Tim and I met virtually through vacation, and we get into that on the show a little bit too. So they're all going to give their predictions. They're going to give their thoughts. Kenny doesn't give predictions because he calls the games, but still great to have Kenny on and give his insight. So it's a great time of year. I can't wait to get into these matchups. A couple games have started. I'll be honest, I'm recording this Sunday, April 21st. These guys joined the show before the playoffs started, but I wanted to wait a little bit to give us some time for things to happen. First and foremost, I want to start with this. The NHL is thrilled. Well, let me start this over. I shouldn't say that. The Arizona, I don't even know where to go with this. This is really bad. As someone who speaks for a living, I'm trying to think of how to digress this. Let's see. A colossal failure is the right way to put it for what happened in the desert with the Arizona Coyotes. You want to talk about one of the best places to play, where people retire, where people move to with their families, where people as pro athletes love to live in, and all the people that make the pro athletes great from a facility standpoint, from an ownership standpoint, from an operational standpoint, from a managerial standpoint, love to live there. Bachelor parties, bachelorette parties, Arizona State. They have huge golf matches out there, waste management, huge events, conventions, monstrous place they have a first-class basketball, the Suns, Arizona Cardinals, right? Super Bowl contenders. This was back in the day a little bit, but they have some juice. They're trending in the right direction under Gannon. Like, this isn't a place where teams go to fail. This is a place where teams have had success, where there's lots of fans. And for fans from all over the country, because people retire. So you have your local fan base, and then you have a fan base that watches teams when their team comes to town, right? So, for example, you're from Philly. You go to the game when they play the Coyotes, right? You're from New York. You go to the game when they play the Islanders, or right, Diamondbacks play a team, right? The Yankees come to town, it's packed. That's the point of that town. You find it in Tampa when you go to a Lightning game. There wasn't hockey fans down there in Tampa. Now there's more Lightning jerseys, 10 times 10 because of their success. You can't get a ticket in there now if you're an away fan. Yes, of course, there's away fans. I get all that. Spring break, we were down there. I forget who they played. And it was the Rangers, and it was packed with New York fans, which is cool. And that's what makes it for these small markets. But what a joke from Arizona to make that fall through. That ownership group, I listen to a ton of hockey podcasts. They dropped the ball tremendously, and the NHL is doing jumping jacks. Yes, it's a failure, but it's a win-win for them because they're getting an owner now in Smith, I believe, who he owns the Utah Jazz, and Utah is a growing city and has a ton of potential and a lot of really great things, a beautiful place. So they'll do great because it's going to be a new team and a new fun thing to do. So a colossal failure in the desert. Before we send it over to them and I give my predictions here briefly, I wanted to touch on that and some NHL news. Shout out to our friends at the Original Fudge Kitchen. They ship fudge and sweet treats across the country. Mother's Day's coming up. Summer's coming up. If you can't get down the Jersey Shore, there's 6 locations from Ocean City, New Jersey, all the way down to Cape May, New Jersey. Multiple locations in Cape May on the Washington Street Mall and on the promenade on the beach. They'll ship it to you across the country, literally right out of the back of the store. I was there this week. They make it, it rests. The fudge just like, oh my God, it's unreal. They make it, it sits in the pans, it rests for a little bit. Boom, it's ready to go. They cut it, goes in the wax paper, which makes it last 2 weeks of freshness. So it is fresh in that wax paper for 2 weeks. It is fantastic. It goes right to your door. Saltwater Taffies. My personal favorite in the entire place are the homemade Reese's Cups and the homemade chocolate-covered pretzels that literally are to die for. Just that hint of salt and the chocolate-covered pretzels sets it over the top. So Mother's Day, take care of mom, grandmom, aunt, the ladies in your lives, fudgekitchens.com. All right, it's time. I got to go through this Stanley Cup playoff bracket. Of course, I did this already. I recorded this episode already, and my mic was hooked up not properly. So Jack in the back, producer Jack's like, dude, it sounds okay, but you got to redo it. First class here, Not For Long Media. You got to redo the show for the people listening. Thanks for tuning in. Stanley Cup playoff bracket. I'm looking at it now. I love this Dallas team. I do. I think the Dallas team is loaded with depth and goaltending. They drafted well. They brought in good free agents. They have young players. They have veteran players that are really good. So I think Dallas takes care of a Vegas team that kind of limped into the playoffs. Who's their goalie? Stone's coming back. Not a ton of time there. I think Dallas moves on in the first round. I think Winnipeg beats Colorado in a really, really, really good series. 2 great fan bases, 2 great places to play. Winnipeg has more depth. Winnipeg has better goaltending. Colorado is loaded with talent. They are really good. They made some nice moves at the trade deadline. They have depth too. But for some reason, I just like this magic around this Winnipeg team. And I think McKinnon, it stinks to say because the guy's a monster. I don't think he gets out of the first round this year. He got a Stanley Cup. That team got their Stanley Cup. And sometimes when you win one Stanley Cup, teams have to players get paid, people move on. It's never the same, right? It's really hard to be a dynasty. That's why I'm such a fan of dynasties. I'm a closet Tampa Bay Lightning fan. What they were able to do in a 5-6 year window is unbelievable, and they just missed their third Stanley Cup when they went 3 straight years. Pretty impressive. I'll get to them when we get to the Eastern Conference. So Winnipeg moves on. Dallas moves on. They'll face each other. I think Nashville is going to upset Vancouver. I don't know why. I just think, why not? If anybody's going to get upset, Vancouver, a team that was really hot and really good all season long. They weren't that great of a team last year. Rick Taka comes in right out of the TNT booth with Biz and the boys and Liam and Kenny Albert and all those guys, and has had a great year. Former Flyer and former Arizona Coyotes head coach at one point in time. A lot of players love playing for him. I think Nashville moves on. I think Demko is a little dinged up, didn't play a full season, I believe. So I like Nashville because of their goaltending and home ice advantage. I think it's really strong. Edmonton, the Kings loaded up and had another nice, off season per se. Traded for some players, but it's not really working out. I like Edmonton. I think McDavid and those guys, their window is closing quickly with these deals running out. Guys are going to get paid, and it's all going to fall apart. And they got really lucky with like this Corey Perry situation that happened that no one knows about in Chicago, where he got relieved of his duties, and now he's playing pretty much for free on the cheap in Edmonton on the fourth line, and that's a really good fourth line player. So Vander Kane's not had a great year for them either. So something to keep an eye on there with Edmonton. So I think Edmonton moves on, Vancouver move on. I think Nashville moves on. I think Edmonton overpowers them in a nice little run and a nice little start to the Barry Trotz era, the Andrew Burnett era in Nashville. He moves on. McDavid and Draisaitl and the Edmonton Oilers move on. I think that's my pick to get to the Western Conference Final, and then Dallas over Winnipeg. I think Dallas's depth in the end is just too much to handle, and I think the same thing's going to happen when they move on and face Edmonton. Dallas, again, their depth, their goaltending, too much to handle for me, and I think they get past Edmonton, and then Edmonton's left with a lot of question marks. Again, McDavid could be one of the best, if not the best player of all time to put on skates. That's right, up there with Wayne Gretzky, and no Stanley Cups, through 5, 6, it could be 7, 8 years of his career at this point. I'm trying to think. It's probably right around that period, 7, 8 years. So crazy stuff, and I think Dallas comes out of the West. Out of the East, man, I love the Tampa Bay Lightning. I love their home ice. I love John Cooper. I love Vasilevsky, Hedman, Kucherov, Stamkos. They're just so fun to watch, and I'm biased. I played there in the XFL. I got to know some great people there. My friends are Lightning fans. I'm a Lightning fan. I really am. But I just think Florida is, again, a magical team. They know how to win. They're tough. They're physical. They can play any game with you. Skill, toughness, physicality, and their goalie is great, Bob. And then Stolarz, their backup's very good too. Former Flyers draft pick from South Jersey. Moves on to Anaheim and a bunch of other teams, then goes to Florida, backs up Bobrovsky, and has a nice year for them. So they have depth in a lot of good places. They have size, and they've done it. They are tough, and they've been literally saying nonstop, I can't wait to get to the playoffs. We just got to get to the playoffs. Well, here they are. They go up 1-0 on Tampa. I think Florida does move on. Boston's going to move past Toronto. I think Toronto's tougher than they've ever been, at least in this era. They have some physicality. They have some, jam, if you will, a hockey term. But I just don't think they're going to be able to put up with Boston. Like 2 goalies, depth, leadership. They've been there, done that. Boston moves on. I think the Rangers sweep the Caps. They're already up 1-0. I said that earlier to my friends today, and they're joking with me. I bet a steak dinner with my buddy Teddy. I do. I think the Rangers sweep them. I think the Caps are fine, but again, the window's closing, and they're in that Flyers no man's zone. Like, a little bit different. They're kind of waiting for Ovi to break the record and retire, right? Like, they're kind of cuffed. It's an interesting situation. They're strapped for cap. Their goalie is stood on his head and had a great year. But I just think that the Rangers are going to sweep them. Carolina are going to take out the Islanders. The Islanders are going to put up a great fight. Patrick Roy and that team is tough. They have some players that have been there and done it. They're not that far removed from being a pretty damn good team in the Eastern Conference. But I do think Carolina moves on. I think Carolina, they have it. They have the it factor. They made the moves this year to get better and bigger. I love Rod Brindamore. I think the team's cool. I played for Carolina Panthers. I like Carolina Hurricanes. I think the Rangers are too good. I do. I think they have too much depth and too good of goaltending. And that's, to me, like, there's only a couple teams that are complete. I think Dallas is one of them. Vegas was in the past. With even Vegas had like 5 goalies last year. They weren't complete, but I like the Rangers. They have loaded lineups. So I got Rangers going to the Eastern Conference. And then I got Florida again with a loaded lineup and goaltending, almost a complete roster. Great coaching. I think Florida moves on. So my picks for the Final Four are the Rangers chalk, right? Of course. Florida chalk, of course. Dallas chalk, and then Edmonton, which would not be chalk. So I think Dallas passes Edmonton. I think Florida passes the Rangers. I think they're a little more battle tested. And I think at the end of the day, the Dallas Stars. I think the Dallas Stars, with their depth, goaltending, young players, and they have even scoring across the board. It's pretty impressive. They have a bunch of 20-goal scorers. That's usually the teams that win. They come in droves. They're not banking on one player to have success. I think Florida does that a little bit with some of their lines. I mean, I think New York can be too. I mean, those teams are so loaded too. I could be speaking out of my ass, but I don't know. At some point, you got to pick a team, and I like Dallas over Florida in the final. So Coyotes, they are very fortunate. And the NHL is very fortunate that this move happened right before the playoffs because it gets kind of swept under the rug. There'll be a new team in Utah. Excited for that opportunity. Appreciate our friends over at Boron. Literally a first-class company, guys, for taking care of your pain management. Huge for allergy season. Check out their allergy relief stuff. Let me know. I'll send you over there some links and things like that. Just direct message me on Instagram. We've already had some people reach out about it, which is awesome. Just check it in where they can find it, where they can buy it. So check them out, guys. Homeopathic care to managing your health and wellness. And then our friends at Fudge Kitchen, fudgekitchens.com. Enjoy Kenny Albert first, Jason Bertitas second, and last but certainly not least, the great Tim Peel, longtime NHL referee. Thanks for tuning in, guys. All right, we got the legendary Kenny Albert joining us. How you doing, Ken?
I'm great, Colin. How are you?
Ken, I'm doing great, man. I'm excited. It is the best time of year. It's playoff hockey, and we have a little preview of all the different matchups and different things, and we won't get into all that today. I want to get into a couple things first. First off, your book. Okay. A Mike for All Seasons. Send me a copy. It's my summer read. I can't wait to get to it. I physically can't read a book right now. I'm not a great reader. I need some time, but I'm excited to get to it summer on the beach this year, man. Talk about your book, that experience, how much fun it's been, signing book. I was so generous of you to send me a book. 1, thank you. But 2, the overall experience of this whole process.
Well, I appreciate it. It was a lot of fun. For 33 years now, I've had one job, and that's to do play-by-play at sporting events. And all of a sudden to have author added to the title or the business card is surreal. I always felt like I had a lot of stories, similar to you. I'm sure you'll be able to write a book someday, just from all of the experiences, broadcasting games in various sports, writing about the people who I worked with, travel tales, hockey, basketball, baseball, football, Olympics, my early life getting into broadcasting, working minor league hockey in Baltimore for 2 years, which I wouldn't trade in for anything. So many stories from those times, and just felt like I had a lot to tell. And every summer, I usually speak at 3 or 4 sportscasting camps, meet with hundreds of high school and college students who want to get into broadcasting at these various camps. And I'm always telling the same stories. They ask great questions, and I'm giving the same answers. So I felt like, why not put pen to paper? And my family was all for it. My wife and kids for many years said, you should write a book. And also never really felt like I had the time. I was always so busy. And then when the pandemic hit, I know personally I was home, as I write about in the book, for 146 straight days. So had a lot of time to do things that I never normally would have time for. And one of them was to sit down at the computer and put together an outline and some sample chapters. I had been contacted by a book agent in New York named Andrew Blauner about a decade ago, and he's a big sports fan. We had some mutual contacts, and he said, if you're ever thinking about writing the book, let me know, and maybe we can hook you up with a publisher. And that's exactly what took place. Triumph Books at Chicago signed on, and back in 2020, throughout the spring and summer, I got started. They said to me, we need 70,000 words by September 1st, 2022. And I'm thinking 70,000 words. How am I ever going to do that? And at one point in 2021, I remember looking up and seeing I was at 30,000. How am I ever going to get to 70,000? But sure enough, I did get there. Initially, I had a big manila folder, and I wrote down about 200 keywords that would remind me about certain stories, people, games that had taken place. And one by one, as I wrote about these events, I would scratch them off. And the editing process was pretty daunting because I would read it over and over multiple times, and you always find something, a grammatical error, a spelling mistake, a factual error, and you want it to be perfect. So got to the end, and also surreal to have Wayne Gretzky and Walt Clyde Frazier as the two names on the cover who wrote the forwards. Two gentlemen who were unbelievable athletes and even better people who I've had the pleasure of working with. And it was published last October, and it's been a lot of fun. We had a number of events at some local bookstores in the New York, New Jersey area, at the NHL store. I've done tons of interviews, and the paperback version was actually released last week. So it's sort of a relaunch, and just really enjoyed it. Love telling the stories, and also really enjoy hearing from different people, friends and family, you know, what they took out of it. And everybody's different. So I can't wait to hear what your favorite parts are. You know, I'll just give, you know, a couple of quick examples. And I'm not, you know, ruining anything if you haven't read the book yet, but I start off by telling the story about I was born 3 months premature, and I won't get into the details, but it's all in the book. But I was 1 pound, 15 ounces. I went down to 1.8. So I tell that story. Also, the other day was the 60th anniversary of the opening of Shea Stadium, where the Mets started playing in 1964. My parents actually met there. They were both working there in various roles, one in broadcasting and one as an usherette, helping people out to find their seats and giving stadium tours. My mother was 19 years old and got a job as an usherette at Shea Stadium, and that's where they met. So if not for the Mets, I wouldn't be here. So those are a couple of my favorite stories early on. I talk about, write about favorite games. The 8 years that I worked with Moose and Goose, Darryl Johnston and Tony Siragusa, the late Tony Siragusa, who was, you know, one of the best, people that I ever knew, and so much fun to be around. So great stories from those years, calling Olympics, Stanley Cup finals, NFL playoff games, etc. So can't wait for you to dive into it.
I can't wait. A mic for all seasons. Check it out, guys. Amazon, Triumph Books. Kenny, it's really great to have you on. All right, let's dive into the NHL playoffs. Let's dive into the NHL season. Biz from TNT. You know, everybody knows Biz, right? He's the biggest influencer in hockey at this point in time. Spitting Chicklets, the guy's an absolute monster, and he works his you-know-what off. He said this was one of the best years ever in hockey. The storylines, and he's right. I mean, I followed the whole season. I listened to Chicklets. I watched all the games that you call. I think the product's in a great place between NHL and what you guys are doing at TNT, the broadcasters, the wealth of knowledge from the men and women that are speaking about the game, tweeting about the game, the players becoming more accessible, more public, the coaches like John Tortorella is unbelievable what he does. Some like it, some don't. The years up now, you got people with two guys with 100 assists this season. Matthews chasing 70 goals. Like, the game is so healthy. Obviously, what's happened in Arizona is crazy, and that adds some more drama. Right, this year is like an unbelievable season. So, your thoughts, a storyline, or something that jumped out to you, because I know you called several games this year, more than several. That is like, wow, this was a really cool year, a really unique thing that you followed all season long. Yeah,
it really has been a fun year, and Biz and those guys are great. They were nice enough to have me on their Spitting Chicklets podcast last fall when the book first came out, and have gotten to know Biz pretty well over the last 3 years as colleagues at TNT. We don't see them very often in person, but at the big events we do, the Winter Classic, the conference finals, so have spent a little bit of time around Biz and those guys. And they do a terrific job in the studio with Liam McHugh, Biz, Anson Carter, Henrik Lundqvist. Wayne Gretzky's in there once in a while, Colby Armstrong and some others. And with our crew, Eddie Olczyk, Brian Boucher, great partners. We had Keith Jones for the last 2 years. He took over as the president of your Flyers. So Bouch slid in seamlessly. We had all worked together at NBC prior. And, when I think back to the first game we did this year, Connor Bedard scored his first NHL goal in Boston. So that was exciting to be on the call for that. So many great young players in the league. You mentioned the 100 assists for both McDavid and Kucherov. Only 3 players had ever done that in league history. Wayne Gretzky 11 times, Mario Lemieux once, Bobby Orr once, and now you have 2 guys do it this year. Unfortunately, Matthews fell one shy of 70. Nobody scored at least 70 since the 92-93 season with Teemu Selanne and Alexander McGillney. But just the level of play. I mean, I remember growing up in the 70s and 80s, and I was watching some of the dynasties, the Canadians, the Islanders in the early 80s, then the Oilers in the 90s. And those teams were so much fun to watch, but it was almost a foregone conclusion that they would win the cup or at least advance to the Stanley Cup final. So there wasn't as much intrigue back then as there is now. You can honestly say, when I look at the 16 playoff teams, there are probably 12 that have a legitimate shot to win the Stanley Cup. We've seen parity in football, parity now in hockey, so many 100-point teams. And then on the individual basis, you talk about the players, the young players with so much skill. We just did Dallas, St. Louis on Wednesday, and we made the point that in 2014-15, not that long ago, 9 seasons ago, Jamie Benn led the league in scoring with 87 points. He won the Art Ross Trophy. This year, you have, at least as of Wednesday, and I haven't looked to see if anybody else got to 100 in the last 2 nights, but as of Wednesday, you had 9 players with 100 points, and you had 20 with more than 87. And that was the benchmark just 9 years ago for the league leader in scoring. So, whether it's McDavid, McKinnon, Kucherov, Matthews, Artemi Panarin had an unbelievable season in New York with 49 goals, 120. Crosby at 36, still playing we had a couple of games down the stretch, a Penguins game in Colorado, and then I had a Rangers radio game in New York against the Penguins. Sidney Crosby absolutely dominated those 2 games. He was the best player on the ice by far. And then you look at some of the other young players, Jack Hughes in New Jersey, and even in the NCAA tournament, Frozen Four, Macklin Celebrini is going to be the first overall pick, another young star coming into the league. So, I agree with Biz. I don't know if you could say that it's the best regular season ever because there have been a lot of great regular seasons, but it's certainly up there.
Yeah.
And just can't wait for the playoffs to get started. You're going to have some, and we've talked about this the last few years. There are going to be several teams that lose in the first round that legitimately could win the Stanley Cup. You look at Boston having to play Toronto, Tampa Bay playing Florida, and a number of other series as well. It's just crazy when you think about it, how many good teams are going to be eliminated early. But, that's how the system works. You have the 1 versus 4, the 2 wild cards. It used to be 1 against 16. Then they went to the 1-8, et cetera. So just can't wait to get started. We'll be in Boston tomorrow night for the Bruins and Leafs. As I mentioned, you have some crazy series out west with Edmonton, LA, Dallas, Vegas, Winnipeg, Colorado, Vancouver, Nashville. It just should be so much fun to watch.
It really will. Such great stuff here with Kenny Albert. All right, wild card teams. I want to touch on them. Then we're going to get to your kind of overall thoughts on maybe your favorite and what you like about them. Wild card wise, Nashville Predators, unbelievable year. I remember thinking back to the draft, what's Barry Trotz going to do? They move on from a couple players. They bring a couple guys in, some vets, nothing huge splash wise. They always have a great goalie, but you don't think they're going to have the number 1 wild card spot in the West. That's absolutely loaded with teams, but they get it. They really do. And honestly, they have more points in Vegas, which is crazy, but obviously different divisions. So Nashville Predators, the Kings made some big moves in the offseason. And then in the wild card in the Eastern Conference, you got the Lightning and the Capitals. So of those 4 teams, Lightning, Capitals, Predators, Kings, is there somebody who sticks out in that group of 4 that you think could make a run for a Stanley Cup?
I mean, I think the Lightning, they're the one team that when you watch the positioning over the last few days in the East that teams wanted to stay away from. I'm sure there were a number of teams that took a big, deep breath when they realized they didn't have to play the Lightning just because they have Andrei Vasilevsky in goal. They have so many players that were a core, part of that core when they were winning the back-to-back Stanley Cups. It's funny you bring up Nashville, and once you get to my book, Barry Trotz was actually my road roommate for 2 years. When I was working in Baltimore, I was the radio announcer and he was our assistant coach. There are some pretty good stories in there that I'll leave for you, for the summer involving Barry. But he's great. One of my favorite people.
I got it right here.
And we did a game, Eddie and Bush and I, in Nashville right before the All-Star break. They played the Kings. Ironically, it was Todd McClellan's last game as LA head coach, and they're one of the teams you mentioned. Jim Hiller took over and helped lead the Kings into the playoffs. So they're a great story as well. Barry Trotz came to dinner with us, with our crew. And at that point, the Predators were on the outside looking in. It was interesting to hear his thoughts about his team and what they were going through. And right after that, they went on that 18-game run without a regulation loss, 16-0-2 to propel themselves into the playoffs. So they're a great story. They have to play Vancouver, coached by Rick Tocchet, who was one of our colleagues at TNT. Vancouver, we were there a couple of weeks ago, had an unbelievable season. Tock certainly has to be considered one of the favorites for the Jack Adams Award, Coach of the Year in the NHL. You mentioned L.A., what they were able to do with Jim Hiller. Washington, I know you live in the area, Colin. Spencer Carberry, a terrific story. Also deserves consideration for a Jack Adams vote. I don't think most people outside the D.C. area had the Caps as a playoff team this year.
No.
And
Before the season, no. And definitely in the middle of the season,
right.
no.
The Islanders of Washington were on the outside looking in for a long time. And when you look at the job that Carberry did, Ovechkin had a great second half after the slow start. Charlie Lindgren took over as the number one goaltender. How about that storyline? You have Ryan Lindgren, one of the top defensemen with the Rangers, and his brother in goal for the Capitals. And apparently they had a text exchange or a phone call the other day where they basically agreed not to talk again until the series ends, until the end of the first round.
I love it. There's so many storylines with the NHL. The game is healthy. Yeah, pretty crazy. The Caps, goal differential, minus 37. Tampa's just above them at plus 23. All right, Ken, so, your thoughts, right? I know there's so much to unpack, but is there a team or two you're like, you know what, these teams are just loaded and they just have the coaches, they have the depth, they have the experience, they have the physicality, because the game does change in the playoffs to make a deep run and win a Stanley Cup?
Right. Again, there are probably 12 teams that feel they can win it, maybe 16. Who knows? I'm close to the Rangers. I do their radio. I've been with MSG for 28 years, and they had a spectacular season. Peter Laviolette comes in, a guy that's won a Stanley Cup, taken two other teams to the Cup final. Now, they were a 100-point team the last 2 years, had a disappointing ending last year, losing in the first round to New Jersey after getting to the conference final the year before. But this year, they set a franchise record, 55 wins, 114 points. They win the President's Trophy, matched up with Washington in the first round. I don't think the Rangers really have any holes, from goaltending on out. Two excellent goaltenders. Their group of defensemen, I feel, from 1 right through 7, you could put them right up there with any other team in the league. And then two terrific, offensive lines with Zibanejad, Kreider, and whoever they wind up playing with. It's been Jack Roslovic, and then Trocheck, Panarin, Lafreniere had an unbelievable year. And then they have depth as well. But you look around the East, like I said, Boston, Toronto, Tampa Bay, Florida, those teams all have to think they have a chance, to win it all. And then in the West, it's stacked. It's so hard to, look at Vegas, the defending Stanley Cup champs. They might be getting some players back now and getting healthier.
They're limping in.
They're limping in a little bit, but getting healthier. I always thought, this could be Edmonton's year, and they got off to the bad start, and then coaching change, and they had a remarkable last 60 games. And you figure one of these years, McDavid and Draisaitl are going to, finally get through the hump and make it to the Stanley Cup final. They got to the conference final 2 years ago, swept by Colorado. You look at Colorado, the goaltending has been a little bit of a question mark over the recent weeks and months, but they have a tremendous team. Dallas won the West, a lot of depth, great goaltending, terrific group of defensemen. Again, I don't want to leave any team out. Vancouver finishes second in the West. Tock did a great job there. They have an excellent goaltender in Thatcher Demko. So you go right on down the line, and boy, it's tough to make predictions. I stay away from predictions for the most part, Colin, but
I like it.
It's going to be great. It's playoff hockey is must watch, especially in the first round. You seem to have so many overtimes, double overtimes, sometimes triple overtimes, and 2 or 3, 4 games every night. So again, can't wait to get started.
It's true. You can make an argument for every single group, from Dallas with the depth they have and how they've drafted is incredible. I mean, they're what a great What a great atmosphere they have too for being in the South and not having that big market, but they kill it too. Like they're the blueprint for Arizona too, right? You got to draft well, you got to develop, and then people are going to love living in the South. Winnipeg goalie.
Last year you had, and I didn't mention Winnipeg. What a year they had with Connor Hellebuyck.
They got a great home ice too, the all white. Like that is so cool.
They beat Colorado all 3 times this year, and they outscored them 17-4. So keep an eye on Winnipeg as well. Their coach Rick Bowness had a great year. You mentioned the South. Last year, the conference finalists were Florida, Carolina, Vegas, and Dallas. Vegas was the northernmost team of the Final Four, believe it or not, in the NHL last year.
Yeah, and Tampa's in the mix too. I think the one thing that Biz always talks about it, state income tax is huge because guys can play, and it's usually in a warmer weather state other than maybe Seattle, but neither here nor there in Washington. But guys really value quality of life now, where before I feel like you just played wherever and you just did your thing. But then you could talk about this. I mean, a lot of these guys love playing in Florida, love playing in Tampa. Vegas is more than just the Strip. Dallas is a great place to raise a family. Away from Houston, I know that well. I lived in Charlotte. I know Raleigh. It's cool. You can get a nice house for a pretty affordable number, and your kids go to great schools. Like, guys really value, and I'm curious to hear your thoughts on this, on where they're living and where they're playing.
Yeah, I mean, who wouldn't love playing in any of those places, right? The warm weather cities, the no state income tax. But I also know that guys love playing and living in, Pittsburgh, Buffalo. There's so many alums of the Sabres that go back and make Buffalo their home.
St. Louis is big.
St. Louis has a lot of alums who stayed around there. Eddie Olczyk absolutely loved playing in Winnipeg. He's talked about it privately and on the air. When he was a Winnipeg Jet, he absolutely loved it up there. It was a great fan base. So
it's great.
Vancouver, a beautiful city.
Beautiful.
Montreal, Toronto, probably a little more pressure on the hockey side there, but when you're winning, great places to play. So, and now Salt Lake City coming in next year as the newest NHL city with the move of Arizona, and hopefully they get. There's a clause that if they can get an arena done, Arizona will get a team back within 5 years. So hopefully that's the case for that fan base as well.
Yeah, it sounds like that's a thing, and they're coming back, and they're going to either it's with the current owner or another owner. But I'm excited for Salt Lake. Like, that's a market really no one ever talks about in sports. I mean, they do. Don't get me wrong, but it's really basketball, right?
Yeah, it used to be a great ownership group. It's the same family that owns the Jazz, so it'll be exciting to go to Salt Lake. I was actually there for the Olympic hockey in 2002, so it'll be fun to go back to Salt Lake for NHL games next year.
Another great market, a growing league in the NHL. I think they've done a lot with the growth, and I think you guys at TNT and ESPN have a lot to do it. Kenny Albert, check out his book. Thanks for coming on, Ken. Safe travels.
Thanks, Colin. Really appreciate it. Enjoy the playoffs.
All right, as our friend Tony Bruno would say, we got the great Jason Martinez on the show. How you doing, Jason?
I'm doing good. Kind of in recovery mode from the season, but looking forward to the playoffs at this point, and wish the Flyers were in it, but wasn't to be, as they say.
It wasn't to be. We'll get into that in a second. Jason has a podcast at Our Media Network, sells some marketing and advertising for him. Geez, with the great Harry Mays as well. Jason and Harry have been mentors to me since my time at Temple, and listened to him growing up in middle school and high school, and do some work together now. And he also is the host of Flyers Daily, a podcast I listen to probably, 4 or 5 days a week, try to stay up to date with it. Great show for Flyers fans out there, 15, 20 minutes, maybe a little longer sometimes. Just depends on what's going on. You work your ass off with it, Jason. It's a great show.
Thank you. 209 straight days we did, and I'm feeling it. No days off. Christmas Day, we work. New Year's Day, we work. During the season, it's every single day. And, we're doing this on Friday. This will be the first day that I don't have to produce content for tomorrow. So I'm looking forward to
pre-recorded
that. Nothing coming out. I'm not putting anything out on Saturday for the first time since mid-September.
That's awesome, man. Well, check it out, guys. Make sure you hit subscribe to that. And appreciate everybody tuning in. Jason is on today to talk NHL playoffs. Before we do that, though, we got to touch on the Flyers. A lot of my opinions are probably aligned with you because I listen to a lot of your stuff. My initial thoughts were, what a ride. What a fun season. I mean, I've been telling my wife about how great she's from Houston, Texas. We met at University of Florida. We've been dating for 10 years, got married. And I've been telling my wife all about how special the Phillies were when they were in the playoffs. We saw Aaron Nola's first start when the team sucked. And that's the only game I took her to. And I'm like, I refuse. Now we don't watch any Phillies. She's not into it.
Yeah.
I refused to take her to a Flyers game until the team was good because of the same situation. I wasn't taking her to a bad product.
First impression, right?
And she's a Houston Astros fan, a big one, but she's never been to a hockey game. So I said, I'm not taking you to a bad Flyers game. We're not. We're going to go to a playoff game this year when they make it. Obviously, they did not, but she watched almost every game with me, and she got into it, and we loved it. And the team was a track meet of a team to watch with some good goaltending for the vast majority of the season. They're trending in the right direction. If you look back, we have a group text. There's some guys that are negative, some guys that are positive. I'm the positive guy. And I'm like, if you told us the team was in this situation last year at this very, very same time, I don't know, you would be like, shit, I'll take that. No doubt about it. It's going down to the wire to make to the playoffs. And we got young talent ascending, hopefully some expiring contracts, and 2 leaders in Danny B and Keith Jones at 3 and Tortorella that are doing some good things. I would sign up for it. So a great year, I think, and they just chose their losing streak for the wrong time, and it was just bad timing.
Yeah, I mean, it was a confluence. I know a lot of fans kind of want to – sometimes you like to pin failure on one thing, but that's too convenient, right? It's not one thing. It was multiple things that happened at the same time, as it often is in team sports. It's never one thing. One guy didn't get it done, or one element of your team's capabilities, came to the forefront and caused you to lose. It was a confluence of a lot of things. And
you always say context, and I learned that, and I use that on my shows. There's context to everything.
Yeah, there's nuance.
We lost because the goalie had a bad night. Well, I don't know. There's 4 tap-ins, and it's 2-on-1. So I didn't mean to cut you off, but I think that's a really good point that you always bring up.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of times, like, people will point to the goalie. You give up 5 goals, they go, well, you can't give up 5 goals and win. The goalie must have sucked. But you got to go, okay, goaltending doesn't happen in a vacuum. There's a whole structure system in front of them. If that fails, what's the goalie supposed to do? Yeah, make some saves you're not supposed to, and probably did in a lot of those games. But you have to look at everything. You have to look at the nuance of it, and look at how the goals were scored to determine that. And same thing with this, kind of as we redux the end of this season, that 0-6-2 stretch that they went on after the gauntlet was what did them in. They were still in a position after the gauntlet, earning 6 points during that stretch that, they still controlled their own destiny. But then you saw the first loss to Montreal, and then the home loss to Chicago. And Torts at that time said, that's our rock bottom, but he didn't know rock bottom had a basement, and the basement was the second Montreal game where they lose 9-3, or the Columbus game where they lose 6-2, and the team had just lost its way. And at a really, bad time of year to have that happen, they got a lot of work to do. My preseason expectation, I was wondering how we were going to evaluate progress with this team, because I didn't think they would achieve the same amount of standings points as they did the year prior when they had 76. Because of the losses of Provorov, Hayes, important key positions, even though none of those players were spectacular, I just thought coming in they were likely a weaker team and they were going to rely on younger players. But they showed early on that the reemergence of Couturier and the way he played, in particular the first 60 games, and the way they got out of the gate and the way they adjusted, the way they attacked in transition and played faster, gave them a lot of success. But ultimately, there was I called the season very dynamic, and the storyline of the things that happened. There was a lot of really good storylines, players ascending and those kind of things. But there was also obviously the Carter Hart situation, which is, goaltending was a huge strength. And if you look at it from just a hockey standpoint, when he left, Sam Ersson really struggled for a while. And then you look at, the trade of Sean Walker, which I think was the right move to get a first-round pick. But it had an effect, especially at the time when Nick Seeler was hurt and Rasmus Ristolainen was essentially done for the year at that point. There's a big effect on the team. And you know how much I believe in. Yeah, I mean, how much I believe in slotting of players. Like the whole next man up thing is one of those things in sports that bothers me. It's okay, yeah, that's good for a game or two, but the next man up is not what you lost, and that through a larger sample size tends to rear its head. So it was a fun season and one I didn't expect. I'm grossly disappointed that they didn't make the playoffs because they controlled their own destiny. And I won't go back to the preseason and say, well, I didn't expect them to be here, so this is just gravy. Bullshit. Expectations in sports are allowed to change, and mine did, and rightfully so. So I was very disappointed because I think there was a lot to gain by getting in at least a round in the playoffs.
I'm a firm believer that players play. And what I mean by that is there's not a lot of external things that can really hurt players' performance. Of course, there's some very personal matters that guys struggle with. There's a lot of things that go on in guys' personal lives that the fans don't know about, and that's fine. It's part of being a pro athlete. It's part of being an adult, right? Things go on in your life.
Well, players are also human.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like they have insecurities and, marital issues or kids or whatever it might be. They suffer just the same as anybody else.
Could be financially. You get support in your family back at home, right? There's way more. But the guys still show up and perform. I think I take the same thing with the John Tortorella stuff. I think everybody makes a really big deal out of this. I think the benching of Coots tied into that. And I want to get to the NHL broader now as we're going to talk really playoffs. But I think John Tortorella is a national story in this league. For sure he is. Of like, okay, he benched Coots and okay, it coincided with the slide and the comments about, well, no comment about a goalie. And like at the end of the day, like you go out and you play your ass off, period. Like you don't let that affect you. If you do, you're not a pro athlete, really. You're not going to make it very long. So I want to hear your thoughts on this. You think it affected the team? Because personally, I think, hey, we just had a slide and the puck didn't bounce our way. And we were out of position certain times that led to bad goals, and that's what happened on the slide, not John Tortorella's comments in a press conference.
Well, I think that it does affect some guys, but that's useful information in evaluating players. You can evaluate young players in particular, and veterans too, to a certain degree when things are going well. You can really evaluate a player when the shit hits the fan. To me, that's when you get the most useful information on, do they turn on each other? Do they start pointing fingers? Does their game go up or down? Are they a guy that drags people into the fight, or are they waiting to be drug into the fight? Mm-hmm. I think you'll learn a ton at that time. And there's this notion, and I think it's societal today, Colin, where, and you know this because you've been an athlete your whole life, and I grew up in playing in a different era, but still, I think it stands to reason. People think nowadays that if a coach is critical or there's disagreement or dissension and there's some scar tissue that builds up between an athlete and a coach, that it's divorce. It's not. It happens. People think that if a player gets in a fight in practice with another player, that the team is infected. No, that is not the case at all. You can fight your brothers. You can fight with your coach. It's okay. It can be healthy if it's done under the right guise of, we're trying to get better to win. We got to push. We got to knock down these barriers that we have for ourselves. And sometimes these people just go, well, if my boss talked to me like that, I think I'd be out of a job or I wouldn't work for him. Well, you're a pussy. You know what I mean? Sports is not about that. It's not. They're pro athletes. They're not there to be catered to.
It's an elite of an elite human being mentally and physically. And I'm not saying people aren't elite at work, but we're talking about
1% of 1%.
And there's a line a mile long of people that are ready to pass you.
Yeah, exactly. And that's the thing. Like, you got to realize that if you want accountability, you can't pussyfoot around it. You can't. And sometimes you got to hear things you don't want to hear in a way you didn't want to hear them, but too bad. Toughen up about it. Pull up your pants and go out there, and if you disagree, prove them wrong. But it doesn't mean divorce. And there's this notion that Torts is so hard on his players that nobody can play for him or he wears them out. Well, the numbers don't belie that, because his average tenure is over 6 years, and the average tenure of a coach in today's NHL is about 2.25. So, the numbers don't bear that out. So I think it's just one other misconception about professional sports nowadays, that everything's got to be hunky-dory and it's got to be, butterflies and blossoms in the locker room or clubhouse. That's bullshit.
Yeah, and it's not true. And I just think that at the end of the day, like, when you're playing on the ice and it's your shift, you're not even thinking about that. You don't have time to think. Like
you're a competitor. You want to.
Yeah. If it bleeds over, like you never would get to this stage because
and like people say, well, they've quit on them. Bullshit. They didn't quit. Guys that get to that level, they don't quit. Like if they play ping pong, they want to rip your heart out and destroy you.
And if they suck, they won't play it. They'll go play another game that they can play you at. Yeah.
Exactly. You play pool with them. They're such competitors in everything they do. You play croquet on the or bocce ball. They want to kill you.
Yep.
As long as they plug in something that keeps score, forget it. They want to compete. If they don't, I don't want them here.
No doubt. So and that's what Torch said, right? And and this is good stuff because I sent this to Matt Rule, and I sent a lot to Matt Rule because Matt and I are close, but also Matt would never probably do that in a press conference, but he would do it. I know his style is similar to Torch, where when people are like, oh, you don't have individual meetings? Of course he has individual meetings. If a guy comes to him and says, I have a problem, Torch will have the meeting. But what he means by group meetings in this thing, what Torch was saying was, I have group meetings because I'm coaching everyone. And Coach Rule was the same way. And people took that when we lost as college-esque. But as we won, they took it as, oh, this is accountability, which I thought was BS. And he got a bad rap for it. We ended up losing games, and that's why he got fired. But my point is, the great coaches do it. Harbaugh, Belichick, they go down the list. And you make a mistake, it's publicly recognized, or you do something good, it's publicly recognized. So,
I coach when I'm coaching you hard, I'm coaching everybody hard.
And the best players are listening to their friends getting their ass ripped.
Yeah, because you don't want to put like Bobby Brink had the one play in the Montreal game. He looked hideous.
Yeah,
and I'd sent it to somebody and I said, imagine if this is you put this on tape. You know, the bird in the sky is never turned off. He's not lying. And I sent it to a guy that played, and he said everybody would be on notice when they play that clip because you don't want to be the guy where that happens. You know, it's embarrassing.
And it's going to happen.
It's going to happen. Yep.
You play pro athletics, it's going to happen. You're going to walk in, and you're going to know, I'm getting it today. And you got to take it and own it. We played the Eagles, and Coach Rule brought me in to block duo or big downhill gap scheme run play. Right? That's my thing. And I missed on 2 blocks against the Eagles on it. Tough. It's not just any game. It's against your hometown team that everybody's watching.
Yeah.
We're in the team meeting room in front of everybody. And this is him. Like, I know him. We go to Cape May. He's got a place in Cape May. So do I. I know. I have beers with the guy in the offseason. I know. And he looked at me and said, you were brought in to do this, and you didn't do it.
Yeah.
Why?
Yeah.
And I had to explain why. And he's like, no, that's not explaining. In front of the whole team, I was sweating bullets. Yeah. But that's the iron versus iron of that's what it takes to be great. And it freaking burned me alive. And I said, I'll never let it happen again. And of course it happened again because that's life. But I'm never going to hesitate. I'm never going to. And that's
not going to cower in the face of that. No way.
No,
right?
You can't. It hurt.
Give me the opportunity again, and I'll prove I can do it. Right?
Yeah.
That's the athlete mentality. How many times I walked into a locker room as a goalie and said to the team when I walked in last and said, you know what, guys? Didn't matter today what you did. If you guys scored 7, I was giving up 8. You know, you were not going to win the game with the way I played today. And I would fall on my sword and say, you know what? I sucked. I'm gonna deal with it, and I'm gonna come back next time, and I'm gonna give you what you need. But today, it's not on you; it's on me. Yeah. You know, I was never afraid to take that on.
That's the best part about sports because you can't teach that in normal world. So,
and you take that into your normal world too.
Yeah,
you go to work some days and you go, you know what? I wasn't good today. I wasn't good enough today. You can't be afraid to say that you need to be better. I think that's really important.
People really respect that. All right, there's your philosophy. 15 minutes of me and Jason, but that's a case study, and you did a little bit on your show. That Tortorella, I mean, I sent it to Coach Rule, and he's like, "I'll look at it because it's that good." And I have so much respect for him for that. I don't believe they slid because of that. I believe puck luck, and I believe in guys not being dialed in, and I don't think that's on the coach. That's on the player.
And there is a lack of talent. There's a talent deficit, no doubt.
No doubt. Okay, NHL playoffs, which we brought Jason on to talk about. Wild card team, Jason. You listen. You get in the dance in the NHL. It's not like all these other ones, like where you're like, oh, anybody's got a shot. No, the NHL, everybody's got a shot. You got Nashville Predators, LA Kings, and then you go up to the Eastern Conference. You got Tampa Bay and Washington. Great group, tons of talent in key positions. Some more than others. But out of those 4 teams, is there a team that jumps out to you there that could make a Stanley Cup run?
Of the teams that you look at in wild card positions, I look at obviously Tampa. I think it's kind of an Achilles last stand for that team. Vasilevsky has the potential to be great as he has been in I mean, look at his record in closeout games. It's enough alone to put the guy into the Hall of Fame with how good he's been and how little amount of goals he's given up. So I look at that team, that first-round matchup, Tampa and Florida, the Battle of the Sunshine State is going to be incredible because I think Florida's built for the playoffs, and Bob's not coming in gassed this year because Anthony Stolarz gave him a lot of good games as his backup. So I think Tampa has a chance to make some noise. I wonder about Vegas. Obviously, you know, they're going to be well over the regular season cap. It's been an erratic year for them. You know, what are they going to do against Dallas in that first round, and Jake Ottinger in particular? So that's one I look at as well. With Vegas, there's intrigue there. I don't think Vegas will get out. I think that Dallas will win that series. I just think they're the better team. I do not like Washington in the matchup against the Rangers at all.
No.
I think Washington's thin, and they just were the kind of the last man standing for Wild Card 2 in the Eastern Conference. And Nashville, I think, is an interesting one, too. I think they can give Vancouver a really good series if they can limit what Vancouver can do off the rush and UC Saros plays out of his mind, which he clearly is capable of. Yep. But at the other end, Thatcher Demko can do that as well for Vancouver. So of all the teams, the one I would probably look at is Tampa, which is crazy to think because I think if Florida gets out of the first round, they could go to the final very easily and win the Cup. Not easily, but But there's some intriguing wild card matchups, no question. But that other one is that Nashville series. I think is really intriguing.
Every one. The storylines are fantastic. You move along here. Boston plays Toronto. Like, that's ridiculous. Like,
Toronto hasn't beaten Boston in a playoff series since 1959. Think about that. I mean, that's a crazy number, and I don't think that's going to change this offseason either. I think that Boston's going to end up upsetting Toronto again.
Yeah, right. There's so much there. And then on the West, right, like this Dallas team's loaded. I want to hear your favorite or somebody you're thinking about because Dallas is loaded. Winnipeg has depth throughout the lineup and obviously great goaltending, great home ice advantage. Like that Winnipeg games when you watch it on TV looks so cool.
Yeah.
Colorado, right, McKinnon, that guy is literally playing at a different speed. Him and Crosby and McKinnon, I would say. I mean, McDavid.
And Kucherov, too. Well, Kucherov plays at a slow speed, but they're all just outrageous, yeah.
They're just outrageous. Vancouver, Edmonton, Vegas. Who do you like out of the West?
Well, when I look at the West, I really worry about Colorado right now for two reasons in that series. Their goaltending down the stretch was not good with Georgiev. They really limped home. Last weekend, they lost 7-0 to Winnipeg in a game that meant a lot at home. They really limped down the stretch, so I wonder I'm just not a big believer, Colin, that you can just flip a switch and go from a team that's not playing their best hockey to all of a sudden having to play at the level it's going to take to beat a team like Winnipeg. I think Winnipeg's a really good team. Like you said, they have good depth. I think they have the best goalie in the league in Connor Hellebuck. There's going to be no such thing as free lunch or a free meal there. You have to earn it all. Now, McKinnon, Rantanen, and obviously Makar and the depth they have helps, but I really worry about Colorado in that opening round series. I don't like them to get through it. I think Edmonton just handles the Kings. I think Edmonton, since the coaching change, I mean, the numbers are incredible. I think they will get through the Kings. I just don't think the Kings are going to be able to deal with their speed, and God forbid if they end up on the PK. So I look at the two things that I think are foregone conclusion, not a foregone conclusion, but the most difficult matchups are going to be Colorado to get through Winnipeg and then the Kings to get through Edmonton. And then Nashville and Vancouver, I think, is a coin flip. And the Dallas-Vegas one is one I just don't have a good handle on because I just don't know what that change in the personnel is going to do for Vegas. When you add guys late in the year sometimes, they don't really find their footing right away, where they fit and how to be deployed and who to play with. So I worry about that part for Vegas as well.
The nice thing about Vegas is, man, they got home ice advantage. They got experience. They got depth. What a ruthless organization. Like, they don't
The
care.
most in the NHL.
It's really interesting.
Yeah, a commitment is 7.5 minutes for that organization. You know what I mean? They have, since they've been in existence, of all their first-round picks, only one is still in the organization. It's great. They use them to to get players, whether it was Petrangelo or Eichel or
Hurdle.
They don't care. Yeah, they're about winning, and that's kind of, you don't mind having some teams like that in the league because they're always going for it, and God bless them. They got a cup out of it already.
The Rams did it in the NFL. They went after it a couple years ago.
Fastest show on turf.
And they did it. All right, out of the East, I know you touched on it a little bit, but I don't think Toronto gets through Boston. I mean, Florida, God, Kachuk and Bob in the playoffs, and that team is just fun to watch. But I do love Tampa. I'm like biased to Tampa. I love dynasties. I do. I get drawn to them. I'm so impressed by them. It's hard to win 3 games in a row, let alone almost winning 3 cups in a row. I love Stamkos, Coop. Like, something about Tampa. I love the arena. I love playing there. That's tough, man. New York's so loaded. This year, there was like a joke. Laviolette, man, like took him from like 100 wins to like 114 to President's Cup. But is there a team? Maybe it's the Hurricanes year with Brendan Moore. They got to win one eventually, right? They got big move.
No, they don't have to. It takes a little luck along the way too. You know, I was a little concerned last year in the conference final because I thought that Brendan Moore sort of lost his own head a little bit.
He did go nuts.
I'm a big believer that if the captain of the ship is freaking out, everybody freaks out. And I thought that he got a little too over the top with his demeanor. Because I think as a coach, you got to be able to roll with it a little bit better. He's a great coach, and he hasn't shown that this year. But I wonder if they're pressed in a really tight series, if that happens again. I think that can be an effect. And I wonder about their goaltending going into these playoffs because, I mean, you're just not going to advance through round after round if you don't get the goaltending. It doesn't mean you have to have, you know, a pseudo-franchise goaltenders. We've seen guys like Aiden Hill win it without being that. But the goalie, whoever it is, has to be playing pretty damn spectacular and has to steal some games. So I wonder about that with them. I wonder what Shesterkin will be in these playoffs. A couple of years ago, he was phenomenal. That wasn't as good last year. They lost in the first round of the Devils last year. So I wonder about that. And President's Trophy winning team, you know, that doesn't translate into cups. So, but I mean, clearly that Ranger team, and you knew Lavi they were going to get the first year bump out of Lavi because why? Because he's done it every time he's gone anywhere.
Why? What's the juice for him? What's the sauce? Why for him? Because I know you know him personally.
2 things. One is he's a great motivator, but his message does wear off after about 2.5, 3 years if you don't capture, you know, the cup. It extends, obviously, if you win, like it did in Carolina for him when he won that cup in, I think it was 2004. But you look at the way he coaches offense, it just empowers players to play a very fun brand of hockey. He coaches offense at the detriment of defense, and that's refreshing to players because they're so used to having coaches that preach from the net out. He preaches from the offensive net back. So that's a different type of message for teams, and sometimes that can come back and haunt you a couple of years into his tenure. But he's a great coach, and players are going to play hard for him. They don't have a choice, and he knows how to get the most out of a team early in his tenure. He's done it everywhere he's been. It's amazing what he's able to do. And that was a team, when they hired him, I mean, we talked about it on the podcast immediately, like, look out for the Rangers because of the Lavi effect in year 1. Yeah. And they delivered again.
They did again. Panarin, great year. Multiple goalies, quick, played great.
He was phenomenal this year, yeah.
He was. He got a little extension, which is great. Go back home to New York. Rangers home ice is fantastic. The Hurricanes get it rocking. And Islanders, it's tough. Lightning will get it rocking. Obviously, I think Dallas got some good juice. Winnipeg's out of control. Colorado's great. Vancouver will be excited. Edmonton, Vegas, like, great. Oh, it's going to be great. Can't wait.
Yeah, I do wonder about Carolina a little bit in that first-round matchup with the Islanders because Sorokin is a guy that can take that series, you know.
It's going to be 1-0 games, Jason.
It won't be the most exciting, Brand, that's for sure. But, yeah, that may be an interesting series, more interesting than people think. I think Carolina will overwhelm them with their depth especially. But that Islander team is kind of built big and heavy for playoff hockey too. And if Sorokin is a machine and he is capable of it, that could be a really long series, if nothing else.
Jason Martinez, geez, Flyers Daily. Appreciate you coming on, brother.
Anytime.
All right, we got the great Tim Peel on. Tim, appreciate you joining the show, man.
Thanks for having me on, Colin.
Tim and I were on vacation 200 yards apart, and I saw him post a picture down in 30A, Santa Rosa Beach, Blue Mountain Beach. We were at. My wife's family has a place there. And I'm like, Dad, I follow this guy on Twitter. I listen to him on a bunch of podcasts. He's a ref in the league. I'm a huge NHL fan. We never connected, but here we are connected like 4 years later, probably, or whatever it is.
Yeah, that was 2 years ago. And I love that part of Florida. We didn't go down this year for spring break. The only problem with that Santa Rosa area, it can be 60 degrees or 80 degrees come in March. So we went for the hotter weather, and we took the kids to Cancun this year.
There you go. Yeah, it's a beautiful place, man. It's a unique place. I love the water, the people. It's a good time. So Stripes are Snipes and Stripes. You and Roenick, which is great as a Flyers fan. I mean, JR was great. JR was great on TV. Obviously, you got the boot off TV.
Yeah.
All the drama with that. You had some drama in your career too as an NHL referee. But the show, I'll be admitted, I have to get into it. I am swamped, and I haven't had time to really listen to any shows, let alone my own, and make sure I'm doing things right. But talk about your show to everybody, and what's your sales pitch here?
Yeah, no, I appreciate you mentioning it. It's called Snipes and Stripes. JR and I started it at the beginning of this hockey season. We had talked about it for a couple of years, and he came up with the name. He goes, "I've sniped a lot of goals, and you wore the stripes." So that's how we came up with it. JR's awesome. He's a big personality, colorful personality. He's in the USA Hockey Hall of Fame. He's got the numbers to back it up to be in the big Hall of Fame in Toronto. Remarkable player. You know, I watched these highlights. You mentioned when he played in Philly, Colin, like, this guy was the ultimate warrior. He was only about 175, 80 pounds. He threw his weight around like he was 200 or 210. You know, there's video clips, and we've shown it and talked about it. There was a game he was playing for the Arizona Coyotes, and he knocked out Mike Modano. 2 nights later, they were playing the Dallas Stars in the playoffs, and he knew someone was coming at him. And unfortunately, Darren Hatcher caught him with an elbow and broke his jaw in like 4 places. And he came back and played in that game, but eventually had to leave. Like, these hockey players back then, it's remarkable what they were able to play through. You know, I was reffing a game years ago when the Chicago Blackhawks were on their 3 Stanley Cup run, and Duncan Keith, who was an all-star defenseman for the Blackhawks, took a puck to the mouth, and we're picking his teeth up off the ice. He goes to the dressing room. He comes back about 20 minutes later and with a full face on, and he had lost 7 teeth. Like, what sport does that happen where a guy loses 7 teeth, puts a shield on, and comes back and plays the rest of the game? It's unbelievable.
Toughest guys on the planet. What a fun sport. I have to ask you before we get into the playoffs here, like, what's the coolest thing you saw with your own 2 eyes, like on the ice, right? Like, some people say it's a cool goal or it's a fight or maybe picking up some teeth off the ice, but like, it's one thing to watch a game on TV, but when you're in person and then you're down on field level and then you're actually on the field, right? Because way different. Your perspective changes.
Right.
It's one thing to stand on the bench and look at the game. It's another thing to sit ice side, but to really be on it, like, you see things that are just wild. So what's the craziest thing, or one of the craziest things or stories you've seen from being on the ice?
Well, you mentioned being, you know, close to the game. I was only ever on the field for 1 NFL game here in St. Louis with the Rams. And exactly to your point, until I was 15 feet away from the players and I would hear you guys hit each other, that sounded a lot different than it did when I was 40 rows back. It was like, man, these guys are animals. Like, I couldn't believe that. I knew it was a physical sport, but the degree of violence that you guys would hit each other was unbelievable. You know what? There are a lot of stories over the years. I think the funny, you know, I look back now and it was funny. I don't know if you remember, it was, you probably wouldn't, but it was 4 or 5 years ago, and I was working a game here in St. Louis, and it was the year the Blues won the Cup, and it was December 19th or December 15th, right around there, of 2018, and Bortuzzo shoots the puck into Florida's end zone, and I see it coming towards me, but I'm in the corner, but it's about waist high, so I can't jump and I can't duck. It's about waist high, so I'm just going to have to let it hit me, and it hits me in the groin area, and I'm all the ways in the corner, and it literally goes all the ways across the goal line and beats Roberto Luongo. The puck went in off of me, and who's a Hall of Fame goaltender. No, it gets better. It's unbelievable. So I fall back. I hit my head on the boards, and Ray Barilli, the longtime trainer for the Blues, comes out, and I'm on all fours, and I hear the horn go off in St. Louis, like when the team scores. And Ray goes, "Are you okay?" And I go, "Did that bleeping puck just go in the net?" And he goes, "Yep." I'm like, "Oh my God, I can't believe it." So anyway, they take me off the ice. They want to put me through concussion protocol. I come back on. I get a standing ovation in St. Louis. We get a whistle. I go down to Luongo. He goes, "Hey, Peelsy, are you okay?" I said, "Yeah, Lou." I said, "But you know what? For the rest of my career, I'm going to be able to say I scored on Roberto Luongo." So I get home that night, and I mean, my phone, it was on the Today Show the next morning. It was on like, you got Dakota Holb or whatever, and those girls on the Today Show, they're talking about it, and it just went viral. And I'll never forget, like, I think Brett Hull has something like 745 goals. And I get a text message that night. I'm at home, and I'm kind of trying to regain my composure from what just happened. And I'm having a glass of wine with my wife. And all of a sudden I get a text message. It's from the great one, Wayne Gretzky. And he goes, "You've only got 744 goals to go before you catch Hully." And I look at Tisha, my wife, and I go, "I have finally arrived." I said, "I've got Wayne Gretzky texting me." So it was hilarious. So then the rest of the story, to sum it up real quick, 2 nights later, I'm doing a game in Chicago with Florida that Luongo plays for. And they were starting Reimer that night, which, quite often happens, the backup goaltender. And we skate onto the ice, and Lou comes right up to me, and he goes, "Timmy," and he's joking, but he comes right up. He goes, "They won't even start me now when you're reffing our games because they're afraid you're going to score on me."
That guy, I hear awesome stories about him.
He's awesome. He's one of the best guys ever.
There's so much to unpack, and I want to get into it so bad, but I want to keep it playoff bound. We're going to have Peel back on because you got a great story, and you've seen the game at a level that really few people do. It's an honor and a privilege to be a referee in the NHL. I know you feel the same way, and it's an honor and privilege to be a part of any league. I played in the NFL, trying to get back into it, but it's struggle when it comes to an end. But I have great gratitude for my time in it because it's truly unbelievable. I've been asking everyone who's coming on the show about these wildcard teams because I think more than any other sport, if you're a wildcard team, you get a chance. You're in the dance here in the NHL. Like, anything could happen. Tampa Capitals, not a big fan of how that team kind of limps in and makes it in an interesting race in the East, and then Nashville and LA. So LA, Nashville, Tampa, and the Caps. I think a lot of people are saying the Lightning because of the goaltending situation and their veteran leadership. But is there a team in that group you think they can win a Stanley Cup?
I don't know if they can. Out of the 4, if I had to pick one that could win a Stanley Cup, it would be Tampa, just because of the experience that they have. Nikita Kucherov, Vasilevsky, Victor Hedman on the back end, Braden Point up front as well. And then John Cooper, the head coach of the Tampa Bay Lightning, who I got to know well before he became a coach in the NHL. He was coaching in minor leagues. Tremendous coach, very smart. I'm with you. I agree 100%. I was watching that Philadelphia Washington game, and I wanted Philadelphia to win that, not because I thought Philadelphia was going to make the playoffs, but I wanted Pittsburgh to get in or Detroit to get in because I think Pittsburgh and Detroit are a better hockey club than the Washington Caps. And I agree with you on that, on your assertion about the Washington Caps. If they push it to 6 games against the Rangers, I'll be shocked. I think that could be a sweeper over in 5. Nashville Predators, this is a team that people thought they were retooling coming into this season. the new general manager, new head coach in Andrew Brunette, and they brought in Ryan O'Reilly. They brought in some veterans, and I would not want to play the Nashville Predators. They've got a phenomenal goalie in UC Saros, but Vancouver's a really good hockey club too. And then when you get to the LA Kings, good hockey club, but you're also playing against the best player in the world in Connor McDavid. And I cannot see Edmonton getting upset in the first round by the LA Kings.
There's always plenty of drama in the NHL, but there is some clear cut ones. Like, I don't see the Islanders moving on. I don't see Capitals moving on. Like, some of the horses. Some of these teams just have horses. I mean, let's start with the Eastern Conference. Plenty of horses with the Rangers, right? They win the President's Trophy. They have 2 goaltenders. They have depth on D. They have like 4 lines. They're loaded. Madison Square Garden's incredible. I know you've called games there. Carolina has depth. Tampa has depth right out of the East, and then Boston loaded. Florida loaded. Tampa high flying, right? But goalie, we'll see how they do on the back end. Who's the teams out of the East that stand out to you?
So I think you're bang on. I think first of all, Boston will beat Toronto. Austin Matthews is a tremendous player, but he's a good two-way player. But I don't know if he's got it in his belly. If I had to pick a player that when the game was on the line, I'm taking Brad Marchand over Austin Matthews, because Brad Marchand will cross-check you in the face. He'll spear you in the throat. He'll try to knock your teeth out. He will do whatever it takes. He will kill somebody to score a goal and get to the front of the net. Austin Matthews, Nylander, Marner, some of them that you could tape a carton of eggs on them and none of them would be broken at the end of the game. I don't see Toronto having the jam to beat a Boston. They may, but I don't think they have the goaltending to do it either. I think Boston's got better goaltending with Ullmark and Swayman. Carolina, they're a good hockey team. They bring in Jake Gensel at the trade deadline, who was the leading scorer for the Penguins at the time. I think Carolina will move on. Florida, Tampa is going to be that is going to be a war. They are going to go at it. They are going to try to kill each other. It's going to be an awesome series to watch. And I'll be honest, I would flip a coin with those two teams, even though Florida had the better record. Tampa's their playoff resolve over the past few years. They're resilient, and that'll be a great series. And then I'm with you on the Islanders series, the Carolina Islanders, and what was the other one that I missed? Rangers Caps. We talked about that. So yeah. It's but you know what? That's a great thing about our sport. I remember 3 or 4 years ago when John Tortorella was coaching the Columbus Blue Jackets, they swept the Tampa Bay Lightning 4 games straight, and Columbus was a wild card team. So to your point, it's like in baseball too, when that wild card team gets in, just like in hockey, what it means is they've been playing really well for the last 3-4 weeks of the season, right? They haven't been in, some teams have clinched a playoff spot 2 months ago and their foot's not really on the pedal. Well, it's really tough to turn the switch on and say, okay, boys, now it's playoff hockey. Let's bring it up a notch. Yeah. Some of those wild card teams have been doing that for quite a while. So they're all ready for the playoffs. So that's why we always have usually an upset or two in the Stanley Cup playoffs.
No doubt. I think you have some high-powered players. Like if Austin Matthews goes off for some, right? He's a great player. He's got the ability to do it. You mentioned it. For some, say he's like, you know what? I'm just going to be a dick, and I'm just going to wreak havoc. And their goaltender stands in their head. They're through, right? That's how it goes. And could be like Kachuk last year. Like what? The guy was on another planet. Tough, physical. I don't know. I remember saying to myself, I'll never bet against that guy again. I want my Flyers to go get his brother in Ottawa. I don't know if that's just give everything for him, because him and his brother are just different cats. So I think even a guy like an Ovi, right? He's getting old and he's kind of tap ins and he got hot, but shit, if he shows up in his old Ovi, their goalie's hot. You know, that's the league, right?
100%. I would not count Ovi out at all. And Washington's goaltender is a guy by the name of Charlie Lindgren.
Yeah.
And he's been primarily a backup his entire career. And he took over the number one position from Darcy Kemper about halfway through the year. And he's been on fire. So I just don't think they have the depth to match up against the Rangers. But who knows? That's why I was telling a story yesterday about Charles Barkley a couple of years ago. Here he is. He's working for TNT. He's covering the NBA playoffs, and he said live on air, he goes, the best playoffs out of any sport are the Stanley Cup playoffs. I'm like, well, TNT can't be too happy, or the NBA can't be too happy about that. But it is like you watch games Saturday, Sunday, Monday, like there's 3 or 4 games on every night, Colin. It is.
I can't wait.
It is awesome. It's the best time of year.
I can't wait. It is. I won't even have any skin in the game, and you're watching like this is an incredible product. So I digress. The Western Conference, really, I mean, they're just tons of talent and depth and scoring. Dallas loaded team, and how they built the team and how they drafted and how that market's grown, which is really cool to see. And Winnipeg, a great little hockey market, great, like their home ice advantage is so cool. I can't wait to see those white towels and Hellebuck and, Colorado, Vancouver, Edmonton, Vegas. Like it's a great group there. And obviously including the wild card. There are a couple of teams in there that you're like, you know what, these 2 teams, I think they got the depth, they got the scoring, they got the goaltender to push through.
You know what? You did your research because the Dallas Stars, they've picked up Pavelski a couple of years ago. They picked up a couple pieces, but Wyatt Johnson, Robertson, some of these young studs that they have are draft picks in their system. The Dallas Stars, for whatever reason, I don't know, it's because they're in Dallas and the state of Texas, but the national media doesn't really talk about them. And I think the biggest reason that they don't really talk about the Dallas Stars is they don't have a Connor McDavid, they don't have a Nathan McKinnon, they don't have an Austin Matthews. But the Dallas Stars is a really, really strong hockey team. Jake Ottinger needs to play well for them. He had an okay season, but he's played well the last couple of weeks. And then, you get to Edmonton, and I've never seen a player that can play at the level that Connor McDavid does. He's transformed the game, and the same with Nathan McKinnon. Nathan McKinnon the other day had a hat trick against the Minnesota Wild, and all 3 goals he started either in the neutral zone or in his end, and just blew by these defensemen and made them look like beer league defensemen. And these guys are NHL players, and that's the type of impact a Connor or a Nathan McKinnon can have. So you know what? I don't think it'll be interesting to see. Winnipeg is a really, really, really good hockey team. A lot of people are actually predicting Winnipeg to beat Colorado. We'll see. To your point, Hellebuck is a tremendous goaltender. You've got Vegas. Are they as good as they were last year? They've added some pieces, but Mark Stone's been out hurt. He's coming back. Can they get the goaltending that they got last year from Aiden Hill? Aiden Hill was the 5th goaltender that they used last year, which is unbelievable. Yep. And he's been hurt. They've been playing Logan Thompson. And what's hard is, and you played in the NFL and professional sports, it's really hard to repeat. And it's not because players don't want it. Players want it. But when you've never had it before, you really want it. You really want it. Not that they want it again, but I don't think it's like the first time that you're ever with a girl or your wife. Well, guess what? It's never the same after that. Right? So it's the same thing in sports. It's not the same when you win it again, because you don't have. I'm not saying you don't have that fire, but it's just never the same, and it's hard to replicate, and it's hard to repeat. So I think it's going to be awesome. I go back and forth. I'm like, is Florida the best team? Is the Stanley Cup champ going to come out of the East, or Jesus, Colorado or Edmonton or Vancouver? We haven't even talked about Vancouver, where nobody even predicted that they were going to make the playoffs this year. And you've got Rick Tocchet, who's probably going to get the Jack Adams Award as the coach of the year. The job that he's done there is tremendous. Is Vancouver, are they built with, Quinn Hughes on the back end, who's a stud? So it's going to be fun. And that's, I can't wait for it to get going tomorrow night.
I'm trying to think hard and focus. And like, you have to do this a little bit when you're thinking about underdogs, because I remember last year when you look back at Florida and if you really think, you're like, you know what? They were more obvious than you thought. Now, they weren't a hot team. They were kind of up and down. They limped into the playoffs, but you're like, okay. I think they got in like the last couple of days. You're like, all right, they have depth scoring. They have some good defensive pieces, and they have Bob. Like, they're going to make a run. Now, the question is, like, who's that this year? I think for me, it's like, is the Nate Dogg, McKinnon, going to drag him into the fight and just be like, nope, I'm going to win it. We're going to do it. Like, I don't care, because but he's already done it. He's already tasted it. Or is it McDavid, who hasn't tasted it, who's like, you know what, guys, this is it. Draisaitl's contract's coming up in 2 years. I'm in 3 years. Like, it's coming to an end. We got Corey Perry for nothing because of what happened in Chicago. It's like our goalie's kicking a little bit. So I don't know. To me, I think I haven't made my opinions yet. I'll make them before all these come out. But
the amazing thing is, you mentioned Florida last year. The only reason Florida got into the Stanley Cup playoffs is because Pittsburgh lost their last 2 games to the Columbus Blue Jackets and the Chicago Blackhawks.
Yes.
And that was the only reason Florida got in. And then Florida got to the finals, but they were down 3-1 in the series. Game 5 is in Boston. Tied hockey game, 5 seconds to go in Game 5. Brad Marchand has a breakaway. If he scores on that breakaway, Boston takes care of them in 5 games. Nobody's even talking about Florida. Yeah. So that's how fine the line is on getting in or moving on to another series. And that's just what's great about our sport. But I agree with you. Like McKinnon, that's why I like a Nathan McKinnon over an Austin Matthews, because Nathan McKinnon, to me, will put his team up. He's got fight back. He will get into scrums. He'll care. He'll yell at his teammates. He'll get on everybody because what you said, willing their team into it. And I don't see Matthews having that same fire. So it'll be great. McKinnon's a stud, man. I don't know how these guys with McDavid and McKinnon, I don't know where they learn how to skate. Like,
that's ridiculous.
I talked to a lot of NHL players and a lot of guys that played in the NHL that live here in St. Louis, and we can't figure it out. We're like, what kind of skating? What did
with
they
the puck
do?
too? With the puck, you're like, what are you doing?
That's the you're absolutely right. With the puck, it's phenomenal.
Peeler, I can't wait to have you on. There's so much I want to ask you, but for this episode, we're just featuring the playoffs. So, hey, buddy, we'll get you on after the playoffs are over, and
or maybe before the finals or whatever you want. But
I would love that. Thanks, brother. Hit him straight today.
Thanks, and good luck with your congratulations on your wife being pregnant.